What happens when you think your home is a place of safety, when you believe the people you love are trustworthy, only to realize that hidden truths, silent betrayals, and unseen eyes are watching? And before we dive into this story, if you want to experience every shocking moment, every emotional twist, and feel the tension as if you were right there in the room, make sure you subscribe to Roots of Revenge, hit like, and comment immediately, because this story will grip you and never let go. And it all started on a quiet night in a suburban house, a home that had always seemed ordinary, peaceful, and secure, where the soft hum of the refrigerator and the gentle ticking of the wall clock created the illusion of calm. Yet behind this calm, a storm was brewing, unseen, silent, and I, the narrator, had made a decision that I would later question for the rest of my life. I didn't tell my paralyzed mother-in-law about the cameras I had installed in the living room and hallways, cameras meant to protect, to monitor, to ensure that nothing unsafe or suspicious happened while she slept, because I thought it was harmless, thought it was practical, that it would be a small measure of security for someone who could not move or call for help easily. Yet that night, as I reviewed the footage from the small screen in the study, the images flickered to life, showing scenes I could not have imagined, the kind that claw at your chest and make you question every choice, every assumption, every word you thought was truth. And there she was, my mother-in-law, peacefully asleep in her wheelchair as the room around her remained still. And then the figure appeared, moving with a deliberate, almost casual stealth across the frame. A person I recognized immediately yet couldn't believe could do what they were about to do. And my heart stopped, a cold, icy fist wrapping around it because every instinct in my body screamed danger, violation, betrayal, and fear. And I whispered her name, silently, hoping she could sense my panic, though she was helpless to respond, and the figure leaned close, something glinting in their hand. The shadowed outline unmistakable, the intentions unmistakable, and I felt my body tremble, unable to look away, unable to act, paralyzed by shock, even as my mind screamed, calculating, planning, analyzing what I could do, what I should do, how I could save her without exposing the footage too soon, without alerting the intruder, because one wrong move could escalate, could turn this from a nightmare captured on screen into a reality far worse than I dared imagine. And as the minutes stretched into eternities, I realized that what I had thought was protection, the cameras, was now my only lifeline, my only chance to intervene without putting my mother-in-law directly in harm's way, and I felt a mixture of guilt, terror, and a strange exhilaration, because in that moment, I understood the terrifying duality of watching and not being able to warn, seeing and not being able to stop, and as the figure's actions became clearer, subtle but deliberate, my mind raced through scenarios, rehearsing dialogue, imagining confrontations, calculating consequences, all while my heart pounded so loud it felt like it could be heard in the footage itself. And I realized that this single night, this single decision not to inform my mother-in-law about the cameras, had set in motion a confrontation, a revelation, a chain of events that would expose family secrets, test loyalties, and force me to confront people I had trusted implicitly, all while balancing the immediate, terrifying need to protect someone entirely dependent on me. And as the figure moved closer to the bedside, their intentions unmistakable, my hands shook, sweat ran cold down my back, and I whispered to myself that there was no turning back, that the truth, once seen, could not be unseen, and that every decision from this point forward would carry consequences, immediate, devastating, and irreversible. And in that silence, punctuated only by the whir of the cameras and the soft hum of the night, I realized that my life and my mother-in-law's safety had changed forever. The night stretched on, the house bathed in the dim glow of streetlights filtering through curtains, yet inside, the tension was suffocating. A quiet, relentless pressure pressing on my chest as I continued to watch the cameras, the footage frozen in my mind, each movement, each sound amplified in a way that made my pulse hammer in my ears, and I realized that the intruder, or perhaps someone I had trusted, was moving with a precision that was terrifying, deliberate, almost surgical in its calm, and every second that passed felt like an eternity. Each click of the camera feed a reminder that I was powerless to intervene directly, that my mother-in-law lay unaware, vulnerable, paralyzed in her wheelchair, completely dependent on those around her, and the guilt gnawed at me, sharp and unrelenting, because I had thought I was doing the right thing by keeping the cameras secret, that this would protect her quietly, safely. But now I wondered whether secrecy itself had opened the door to disaster, had left her exposed in ways I had never imagined, and as the figure paused in the frame, looking almost directly at the camera as if aware of being observed yet unbothered, my stomach dropped, my mind racing to understand, to predict, to control the uncontrollable, and I whispered to myself, "Stay calm. Don't panic. Think." Yet panic was inevitable, creeping in despite my best efforts, a shadow that made the room feel smaller, tighter, suffocating even as I clutched the phone and leaned closer to the monitor, desperate for clarity, for any way to intervene, and then the figure did something that made my stomach turn. A movement so deliberate, so shocking, so intimate, that I had to blink to make sure I wasn't imagining it, and I realized with a sickening clarity that this was no random intruder, no accidental trespass, no careless mistake, but someone who knew the house, knew the routines, knew how to move unnoticed, and the betrayal hit me like a physical blow. The realization that the threat had been inside, hidden in plain sight, and the footage revealed details I could not have anticipated. Subtle gestures, silent manipulations, movements around the room that indicated knowledge of schedules, habits, and vulnerabilities, all calculated to exploit, to control, to intimidate. And I felt a surge of rage mixed with helplessness, a cocktail of fear, anger, and sorrow that made my hands shake as I adjusted the camera angles, following the intruder's every movement, and the silence of the house contrasted with the chaos in my mind, each heartbeat echoing like a drum, each breath shallow and quick, and I thought of my mother-in-law, peaceful, unaware, trusting, and I felt both protectiveness and despair, knowing that the longer this went on, the higher the stakes, the closer we were to a breaking point. And I realized that this night, this footage, would reveal truths I had long suspected, but never dared confront. That the very people we call family or close friends can hide secrets so dark that seeing them makes you question everything you thought you knew. And as the figure reached for a cabinet near her bedside, I held my breath, the moment stretching into infinity, knowing that one wrong move could end in catastrophe, and I whispered her name softly, silently, wishing she could sense my presence, wishing there was some way to protect her without giving away that I was watching, because revealing the cameras too soon could alert the intruder, could escalate the danger. Yet remaining silent carried its own guilt, a weight that pressed down with relentless force, and the camera captured every subtle detail, the tilt of the head, the cautious steps, the way they lingered near items that mattered to her, almost as if they were searching for leverage, and my heart pounded, a mix of fear and fury, as I considered the confrontation that would inevitably follow, the questions I would have to ask, the truths I would have to face, and the emotional fallout that would ripple through our lives forever, and I realized that this was not just about protecting her in a single night, but about uncovering something far larger, a betrayal hidden behind smiles and polite conversation. And I felt a mixture of determination and dread, knowing that the morning would bring answers, confrontations, and revelations, that the people involved would have to face consequences, that our family, our trust, and even my own sense of reality would be tested in ways we could not yet imagine. And as the night wore on, shadows lengthening across the walls, I continued to watch, every muscle tense, every nerve alert, fully aware that the events unfolding on those screens would define the course of our lives, and that no amount of preparation could truly ready me for what I would see next. The house felt smaller as the night deepened, shadows stretching across walls and floors, every creak amplified, every distant sound making my heart lurch. And as I continued watching the monitors, the figure moved again, deliberate, almost casual. Yet every action carried a tension that made my chest tighten, my palms slick with sweat, because what I saw next made my stomach drop like a stone in icy water, a movement so shocking, so intimate, that it forced me to question everything I thought I knew about the people around me, and the betrayal unfolded in slow motion across the screen. The intruder wasn't just wandering or searching. They were taking things, touching personal items, rifling through papers, moving toward the areas I had thought were secure, and yet, even as fear clawed at me, I felt a cold clarity, a grim understanding that these images, these actions, were evidence, undeniable proof of hidden malice that I had suspected, but never confronted, and the knowledge burned through me, mixing rage, sorrow, and a protective instinct so intense it made my hands shake, because my mother-in-law, paralyzed, trusting, completely unaware, was exposed to danger in ways that I could not prevent in real time, and I realized that my decision not to tell her about the cameras, though made with good intentions, had placed me in the impossible position of observer, forced to weigh every action carefully, to plan intervention without alerting the intruder, and every second stretched endlessly, tension coiling in the air like a living thing, while the person moved closer to her bedside, their gloved hands brushing across surfaces that were sacred in their normalcy, and I whispered, almost desperately, for her to feel my presence, to understand in some primal, instinctive way that she was not alone, while my mind raced with calculations. Do I confront them now? Wait? Call for help? Risk escalation? And then came the subtle signs that made my blood run cold, the deliberate hesitation, the way the intruder seemed to glance toward the cameras as if sensing them but ignoring them, the small, almost taunting gestures, leaving traces that only someone intimately familiar with the house could know, and my breath caught because the realization hit hard. This was someone close, someone with knowledge, someone who had the access and familiarity to exploit my mother-in-law's vulnerability, and the betrayal twisted in my chest like a knife, because trust, once given, now felt meaningless. Every family interaction suddenly loaded with doubt, suspicion, and fear. And yet through the terror my resolve hardened, because I could not let fear paralyze me the way it had paralyzed her, and I began plotting quietly, mentally, preparing for confrontation, for exposure, for the moment when truth would have to meet action. Every option weighed with ruthless clarity, knowing that hesitation could cost everything. And then the figure paused, crouched near her bed, and I saw the glint of something sharp, a fleeting motion that made my entire body go rigid, my mind screaming with the urgent need to act, to save, to protect, yet knowing that even a single misstep could escalate, could alert the intruder, could put her life directly in danger. And in that frozen, terrifying instant, I felt a mixture of anger and fear so pure it almost overwhelmed me. The raw intensity of it pushing me toward instinctive action while every rational thought screamed caution, and I realized that the confrontation would not just be about what I saw that night, but about confronting hidden truths, addressing betrayal, and challenging the very people I had trusted most, and the thought made my chest tighten further, because exposing someone you love, or someone you thought you could trust, is never simple, never clean, never without fallout, yet the stakes were too high to remain passive, and as I continued watching, documenting every subtle movement, every gloved hand, every fleeting glance, I felt a grim clarity. The night would define the relationships, the trust, and the unspoken rules of my family forever, and that the next hours would bring confrontation, revelations, and emotional upheaval unlike anything I had experienced before. And in that darkness, lit only by the flickering glow of the monitors, I understood that I was no longer merely a passive observer. I was a participant in a story that demanded courage, strategy, and emotional fortitude, because the safety of someone I loved depended entirely on my choices, my timing, and my ability to face betrayal head-on. And as the minutes stretched and the intruder continued, calm, deliberate, yet entirely invasive, I felt the weight of responsibility press down harder than I ever had, knowing that inaction was not an option, and that the coming confrontation, inevitable and unavoidable, would not only reveal the truth, but forever change the dynamics of trust, loyalty, and family, leaving scars that would be felt. The first light of dawn crept into the house, painting the walls with a pale, cold glow. Yet inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension, a mixture of fear, anger, and the uneasy weight of truth finally revealed, because the night had changed everything, every trust, every assumption, every quiet understanding that had existed within these walls now fractured. And I stood in the study, staring at the monitors one last time, knowing that what I had witnessed, what I had kept secret, what I had observed silently would not remain hidden, because some truths are too powerful to stay buried, too shocking to remain contained. And as I finally approached my mother-in-law's room, she stirred slightly in her sleep, completely unaware of the danger she had narrowly escaped, her vulnerability a stark reminder of how much was at stake, and I felt a mix of relief, guilt, and exhaustion, because the footage had given me clarity, had allowed me to prepare for the confrontation. Yet the burden of witnessing the betrayal alone weighed heavily on my conscience. And when I finally called the police, every word of explanation, every detail of what I had seen, poured out of me in a torrent of urgency and fear, while family members arrived slowly, their expressions a mixture of disbelief, horror, and quiet admiration as the story unfolded, because the intruder had been someone they knew, someone trusted, someone whose duplicity could no longer be ignored. And as the investigation progressed, the social and emotional fallout became impossible to ignore. Whispers rippling through relatives, friends, and even neighbors, some expressing shock, others sympathy, some disbelief that someone so close could act with such calculated disregard. And through it all, I felt the strange duality of vindication and sorrow, because justice was moving forward. Yet the relationships that had once felt secure were irreversibly altered. The trust I had taken for granted shattered, leaving behind a raw, jagged edge that would not easily heal. And as news of the incident reached social media, discreetly at first, friends and followers reacted with horror, concern, and an overwhelming desire to understand how something so intimate, so frightening, could occur in a supposedly safe home. And the story began to spread, quietly at first, then more publicly, as people shared their opinions, commented on the betrayal, and weighed in on the courage it had taken to protect a vulnerable loved one in the face of hidden danger. And I watched, exhausted but resolute, knowing that this visibility, this attention, was not about me or my choices, but about the lessons it imparted, the importance of vigilance, the necessity of courage, and the moral imperative to defend those who cannot defend themselves. And as my mother-in-law slowly awoke, her eyes clouded with sleep, I knelt beside her, brushing her hair gently from her forehead, whispering words of comfort and reassurance. "You are safe. Everything is going to be okay. I'm here." And in that small moment, I realized that despite the fear, the betrayal, and the heartbreak, the most important thing had been accomplished. She had survived, unscathed, and her dignity remained intact because someone had chosen courage over fear, action over hesitation, and love over complacency. And as the day wore on, family members began to gather, some hesitant, some curious, all aware that boundaries had been tested, secrets exposed, and dynamics forever shifted. And I could see the subtle, unspoken acknowledgement in their expressions, that what had been witnessed, what had been prevented, could have gone very differently, and that vigilance, truth, and courage had saved the day, while also exposing cracks that could never again be ignored. And through the whispers, the questions, the quiet shock, I felt a strange relief, because the fear that had haunted the night had been transformed into action, clarity, and justice, and I knew that the events would ripple beyond this house, beyond this family, reaching friends, neighbors, and even online audiences who would marvel at both the horror of betrayal and the bravery it took to confront it. And as I took a deep breath, looking out at the morning sunlight glinting off the quiet waves outside, I knew that the story, while terrifying, was a testament to human resilience, vigilance, and the protective instincts that define us. And to anyone watching this story unfold, I want you to reflect, to consider, to ask yourself, how far would you go to protect someone you love? Would you have the courage to act when danger lurks quietly, unseen, and trust is violated in the shadows? And I want you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done, how you would have reacted, and make sure you subscribe to Roots of Revenge for more shocking, emotional, and intense stories where truth is revealed, courage is tested, and silence is broken. Because sometimes the most powerful